Hi, and welcome everybody to the Dutch Cloud Meetup Cloud Takeaways for this time. Today I'm together with Henry, my co-organizer. Hi, Henry. Nice to have you here as well. And to get started, let's first go off to specific slides and to mention our sponsors as well. So we already had the short introduction, so I'm together here with Henry. We will host this session for today. Next up, our sponsors. We have 4 sponsors at this moment for our Dutch Cloud Meetup. That's Betabit, SBS, 350, and EBIS. For everyone that's watching us live now, we are live on LinkedIn, YouTube, and on Twitter. And all questions you have regarding this session can be asked in the comments, and we will make sure that the questions are asked to Wim and Misha, who will be doing our session for today. So without further ado, I will also bring in Misha and Wim to the stream.
Hi guys.
Misha, hi Wim. Are you guys ready?
We're all set, yeah.
Okay. So I will remove my slides and you can share your screen.
Let me see if I can share my screen. Share screen. Normally my Azure Portal should be showing.
Yes.
There it is.
There it is.
Let's see if I can take my slides with me. I guess they're showing my slide.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So we can kick off if you want.
Yeah. Yeah.
So hello and welcome everyone. Thanks for joining. Like Mike and Henry already said, Micha and myself are going to talk about one of our favorite services in Azure today, namely Azure Bastion. And our session is titled Azure Bastion, one does still not simply walk into my VNet. Why still? Because it's a version 2 of an older session Micha and myself delivered for the last time, somewhere in the beginning of last year, I think.
Yes.
But that's correct, I think. Yeah, it was somewhere in January or February, so a long time ago. But in the meantime, Bastion has a lot of new features, and that's why we created a version 2 of our session. And we really hope that by the end of the session, everyone who's not yet using Bastion will start using it. Before we start, we first of all want to thank Mike and Henry and all the other people involved with the Dutch Cloud Meetup for setting up this event and, of course, for allowing us to deliver this talk. So on the agenda today, the things we're talking about, first of all, we look at the common VM administrative access methods, the different ways, the good and the bad ones, on how you can connect to your Azure IaaS VM before and these days even next to Azure Bastion. Then we will talk about what Azure Bastion is and dig a little bit deeper in how you can deploy it, configure it, even automate it, and of course use it. And before closing off, we hope we still have some time for a Q&A, where we would love to answer any of your questions, or like you can see on the screen, we can simply leave it to Gandalf. Let us also shortly introduce ourselves for the people who don't know us. My name is Wim Matthijssen, and just like Micha, I live in Belgium, where I work as an Azure technical advisor for a company called Proximus. Community-wise, I'm a founding board member of a Belgian user group called MC2MC, which stands for Microsoft Cloud and Client Management Community, where we mainly focus on Azure and Microsoft 365, but we also keep an eye on security, Hyper-V, and even the complete Windows Server landscape. Next to that, I have my own blog, https://wmatthijssen.com. I'm also a Microsoft Azure MVP and a Microsoft Certified Trainer, and like you can see, and probably like most IT professionals these days, I'm also on Twitter and LinkedIn. So if you ever want to reach out or just want to say hi, you can always contact me to my Twitter handle, or you can even now, I think, simply scan the QR code at the right bottom of the slide. And I think, Micha, you can introduce yourself.
Yeah, so my name is Micha Witz, and especially for this Dutch Cloud Meetup, I dressed in orange. So I matched the colors for the session today. I'm an independent contractor. I work at Connection, which is a West Flemish company where I do Azure solution architecting. Also proud member of MC2MC, SWIM, and since the end of 2018, I became Microsoft MVP on my top favorite service, just on top of Bastion, Azure Virtual Desktop. So that remains my top service on Azure. Sorry. And you can also see my Twitter, website, and LinkedIn. We are always eager to help you and answer questions, or if something is not clear or you want to change something, always contact us, or you can always contact us there. And I think now you can really kick off the Bastion service.
Yeah. So with all those things being said, like Micha already said, we can now start focusing on our first topic, where we will look into the most common VM administrative access methods. And as most of you will know, the easiest way, but also the least secure one to connect to an Azure VM is through the use of a public IP address, or shortly said, a PIP. In this way, you can connect to the VM through RDP or SSH, depending if the VM is a Windows or a Linux VM. The only thing you need to do is to associate a new or even an existing PIP to your VM's network interface. And of course, in the case you have an associated network security group, an NSG, attached to the subnet where the VM lives, you just open the specific ports, 3389 and for SSH 22 with an inbound rule, and then you can go on. But let us say this way of connecting is okay when you, for example, are studying for an Azure exam and you need to test things out, or when you need to do a quick test in your own company's dev or test subscription. But you should never, we can't say and repeat this enough, use this kind of connection to connect to any of your Azure production environments and to connect to any of your production or business critical VMs, because one or both of those management ports, is it 3389 or is it 22, will be widely opened on the internet. And in this way, your VM can easily be attacked and breached by hackers or script kiddies, or like you can see on the slide, by orcs, for example. Another way, next to that one, which we still see not that much anymore being used, is by placing your IaaS VMs behind an Azure external load balancer. Instead of the VM, the load balancer then uses the PIP. But in Micha's and my opinion, it's kind of security through obscurity, like they say, because one or both management ports will still be widely open on the internet. The only difference is that there is now an external load balancer in front. But again, not a real secure method to connect to your IaaS VMs in any production, QA, or even pre-prod environment. And this because, like I already said, attackers mostly target those open management ports on those internet-facing VMs. They can use port scans, they can use DDoS attacks, or brute force attacks. And in case, for example, of such a successful brute force attack, an attacker can easily compromise the VM, and in this way establish a foothold into your environment and start doing whatever hackers do in your environment. So whenever they breach some VM, mostly the way is open to get into your environment and kill things, drop things, steal things, or whatever. On the screen now you see an example when you have opened one or both management ports via an inbound rule in an associated NSG, and you would open through the Azure Portal that NSG. You will see that in the name field, the rule name will be preceded by an orange Azure triangle with a white exclamation mark inside it. And in this way, Microsoft already tells you that there is a huge security risk by opening these ports to the internet. So once again, not really a good idea to use this in any production environment. But then, of course, you can ask a question, how do we then securely connect to our VMs? Well, first of all, by using a site-to-site VPN or an express route. In this way, you can connect from your on-premises network to a secure tunnel to the private IP address of the VM. Next to those two options, you can also use a point-to-site VM, which allows you to set up a secure connection from your own computer, or even maybe from a privileged access workstation, or PAW, if those are used in your company. And to dig a little deeper into a point-to-site VM, these days you can use certificate-based authentication, where you can even use self-signed certificates. When you set these up, you just need to specify an address pool based in the 172 range. As tunnel type, you then select IKV2 and OpenVPN, and you set authentication type to Azure certificate. Then you upload the publicly of the root certificate to Azure, and then you simply download the VPN client, install it on your PC. For a Windows device, if you download the package, the executable will be in the IMD64 folder underneath the zip package. And when you all set it all up and everything is okay, you simply press connect, and you can go on and you can securely connect from your Windows device or Linux device to your VMs in your Azure environment. To make it a little bit easier, I already wrote 2 blog posts which automate the whole point-to-site VPN setup. It will create a client certificate, a root certificate with one script, and then configure the point-to-site VPN with use of that root certificate and uploading it in another script. So the QR codes of both blog posts are on the slide. So if you ever want to use it, maybe just when studying, go check it out. It will speed up the deployment. Next to Azure certificate authentication, you can also use Radius. And like you can see at the screen at the moment, you can even use these days Azure AD authentication. The difference is when you configure this, the address pool, you can still use 172. But as tunnel type, you specify OpenVPN, and as authentication type, you specify Azure Active Directory. Then you need to give your tenant, audience, and issuer. You fill it in. There is a Microsoft doc written. You can follow it because the audience and issuer depends on to which type of Azure environment you're connecting. But I think most of us will be to the Azure public one, so it will be the same mostly. And then you, on your own Windows device, you can use the Azure VPN client, which you can simply download from the Microsoft Store. So open your Microsoft Store, type in Azure VPN client, download it and install it. And then, just like with certificate authentication, you download the VPN client. Instead, now you look for the Azure VPN config.xml file. You add a new connection, connect it with the XML, and then you're all set to go, and you simply can connect. The only thing you should keep in mind is if you're ever using an Azure network adapter, so you have an on-premises server, you want to directly connect to your Azure environment without a site-to-site VPN through the NIC with an Azure network adapter, it won't work with Azure AD authentication. So your point-to-site VPN should be set up with certificate authentication, and otherwise the Azure network adapter won't be able to connect. Just the tip we want to give. And then some companies also have another way to connect, and that's by the use of a jump box or a jump host, or even jump server, like some people like to name it. Mostly this jump box is a Windows IaaS server, but we also saw a small Linux VMs deployed. That VM is used to access and manage all other VMs in the environment. You kind of jump from that VM to the other VMs. In most cases, that VM also still uses a PIP to allow easy access to that VM from on-prem, for example. But also keep in mind, once again, it's another VM you need to manage, you need to update, you need to backup it, and it's a VM you need to troubleshoot whenever it fails. And if that's the only way getting into your environment and you need to set it up high available, you should have at least have 2 VMs deployed, so prices will go up and so on and so on. So if you're still using such a junk box or any other management VM or VM in your environment, which still has an associated PIP, there is a way to better protect it, and this with the use of just-in-time VM access or JIT. For people who don't know JIT, JIT enables you to lock down your VM at the network level by blocking inbound traffic to specific management ports like RDP or SSH. And in the meantime, limit amount of time to those management ports, how long that they're open. I think the maximum is still 24 hours. Good to know is when you want to start using JIT, it's available if you use Microsoft Defender for Cloud with the Microsoft for Server Plan 2 enabled. But I think, Micha, it's maybe better I shortly demo this. So let me go through my Azure portal. It's showing, Micha, at the moment. Micha?
I can see your Azure portal.
Okay. You were gone. I didn't hear you.
Muted.
Okay, yeah. Sorry. So you can see I'm in my Azure portal, and just to show you, I open Microsoft Defender for Cloud. I simply go to my environment settings. And for example, let me scroll down to a specific subscription. Let me take my production corp. If I open that one, oh, no, that's not the thing I need, sorry. Workload, you go under workload protections, you scroll down, and you can find JIT, just-in-time VM access. If you click on it, you can see I already have 3 VMs configured with JIT. You can see it's on port 3389, and this one is active now. It's active for 3 hours. If you ever want to edit it or change it, you can simply click on edit. Add an extra port, for example, 22. You specify the protocol, how you want to do it, maybe only from a specific IP address, and you can upscale the amount of time to 24 hours. That's it. Let me close that one, for example. You can also see which VMs in your environment are not configured for JIT, and from here you can simply configure it. That's the thing I wanted to show you. Under the environment settings, if you scroll down to a specific subscription, let me do it. Let me take my dev subscription, and you, for example, want to be able to use JIT, you just click on the service, and you can see my plan 2 is enabled. If you click on change plan, you can see that plan 2 has JIT, and if you scroll down, you would enable plan 1, you can see JIT is not available. So you need to specify server plan 2 these days, otherwise JIT won't work. And then if you want to use JIT, I think it was already on my, let me go to my VMs. Ooh. If you want to type fast, you always make typos. I have my management server, for example. Like you could see in the previous screen, I already enabled the JIT, so I'm probably still in that 3-hour window. So if I want to connect, I click on RDP. Normally, there will be a request access button. If you're not already requested access, you click on it, and in the background, JIT will enable. It takes around 2 to 3 minutes before it's completely set up in the back. And then you simply download the RDP file, and you can connect to your VM. But in the sake of time, I already downloaded it. I can connect now. I can type in my super secret password. Let me see. And my RDP connection, because it's a Windows VM, will open. And you can see I'm using my public IP address, but in the back, it's secured by JIT. So I think, Micha, with this JIT demo, we can go over to your topic and explain us what Azure Bastion is.
Yes. Let me see. Normally I should be sharing, but yes, perfect. And that's some StreamYardception.
There it is.
Okay. So let's talk about Azure Bastion. What is Azure Bastion? This is the definition from Microsoft. I'm not going to read it completely, but the most important thing is that it is indeed a PaaS service. So it's a PaaS service, and as Wim and myself like to call it, a jump box as a service, which is provisioned within your virtual network in your Azure subscription. It gives you the opportunity or the option to securely RDP or SSH to a VM in your environment, but it is using the Azure Portal, so it is always secured with HTTPS. The top thing is you don't need to have a public IP assigned to your virtual machines. Not even, as Wim said, on load balancers. It's only one public IP for the Bastion service, and that's it. No public IPs assigned to your virtual machines. Also important, you don't need to install anything. So you don't need to download an agent or a client or anything like that. Not on your servers, not on your endpoints, nowhere, just it's clientless, it's from within the Azure Portal. Internally, the Azure Bastion service itself, it's a scale set, so it has the possibility to scale up and down, but we will look into the Bastion service SKUs when you will have that possibility. It gives you great protection because, as Wim said, if you open up 3389, you are vulnerable for attacks, not only attacks on your port, but also for exploits, for malware targeting, things like that. If you use the Azure Bastion service, you don't have that issue because you're not exposed to the internet anymore, so you don't have that issue or that thing to think about for your virtual machines. There are two SKUs available right now, one basic, one standard. If you look at the basic SKU, it's already a great service because you can just connect to your virtual machines from within the Azure Portal. You can use a key vault. I will demo that as well. So use a key vault for your private keys to connect to your Linux virtual machines, which is perfectly available. So connect to your Linux VMs using SSH, connect to your Windows VMs using RDP. And also a new feature is the audio output. So if you are connected to a Windows VM, for example, you can simply enable audio within the Azure virtual machine, and then you have audio output on your Bastion service as well. Great service and easy to use. If you want to have additional services or additional options, then you have to go to the standard SKU. And the standard SKU now has the scaling possibility, so you can manually scale if you want. You can even change the inbound port if you want. And a really important feature is you can use your native client. So you can connect from your endpoint, your own virtual machine, your own desktop, to a VM running in Azure using the Bastion service. It can even be a Linux endpoint. It can be a Windows endpoint. It really doesn't matter. But you can use your own native endpoint to connect through the Azure Bastion service. Coming with that, it also gives you the option to upload or download files. So within the standard SKU, you can now upload and download files to your Azure virtual machines, where in the basic SKU, you only have clipboard redirection. So if you need to transfer those files, you need to jump to the standard SKU. Also important, if you want to disable clipboard redirection, like you have on Azure Virtual Desktop, then you need to jump, or you need to use this standard SKU as well there. So that's a bit of an overview between the two SKUs that are available at this moment. How does it work? This is a simple representation from a VNet. As you can see, you deploy Azure Bastion within your VNet. So you have to create a subnet, but we will show you that as well. You have to create your subnet, deploy your Azure Bastion service, within your VNet in your resource group. Only 443 needs to be exposed to the internet. So that's the only entry point that you have within your environment, only connected to your Azure Bastion service. From the Bastion service, you need to open up 3389 or 22 to your backend services, to your backend VMs. So on that NSG, you need to open up those ports because the Bastion service needs to be able to connect, of course. But as you can see, no public IPs need to be assigned to your virtual machines. Only the Bastion service needs that one public IP. At the beginning, when we first did the session, there was a big issue with Bastion. Bastion only worked within one VNet. So if you had a hub-spoke model, then you would need to deploy Bastion, a Bastion service, within each VNet, which is not ideal. And luckily, Microsoft quickly fixed that, and it also supports VNet peering. So if you want to use Azure Bastion in a hub-spoke model, that works perfectly. As you can see over here, we have our hub VNet. There we deploy our Azure Bastion service. It's peered to 2 spoke VNets, and we simply use the Azure Bastion service in the hub to connect to any of those spoke VNets, to those virtual machines in those spoke VNets. If you want to connect to the native client, so using the native client, it is possible. You need to have the standard SKU, as I said before. Depending on your connection, of course, you can do the upload and download. And there are 2 ways of connecting. If you are using a Windows PC, you can simply use the native client on your device. If you are running on a non-Windows device like Linux, then you need to use Azure CLI. And there's a command available now, AZ network Bastion tunnel, and that gives you the option to set up a tunnel to your virtual machines running on Azure, but through the Azure Bastion service. So that's a really great feature which is available right now. Some use cases why you want to use Azure Bastion. If you don't have, if there is no VPN or ExpressRoute, like Wim said, for a secure connection, then you need to seek an alternative, and Azure Bastion does fill in that blank. Also, if a Jumpbox doesn't meet your security requirements, like 3389 is not allowed on your NSGs or Azure Firewall, or if it's too expensive to maintain that Jumpbox, then then you need to seek an alternative, of course. Also, if you have a policy within your company where 3389 is not allowed and it needs to be HTTPS, then Azure Bastion is your service. Also, if you have to use PaaS services, a lot of companies are shifting from IaaS to all PaaS services, then you cannot deploy an IaaS for front-end services. So you need to use Azure Bastion. It's also easy deployable and removable. Wim will definitely demo that as well. And also, if you want to have temporary access in combination with all those previous requirements, even with JIT, then Azure Bastion is still a great option for you, or even the only option for you. Pricing, not something to forget, of course. This is the pricing for the Azure Bastion Basic SKU. So it comes around 130 euros per month in West Europe. Comparing it to the standard SKU, where it's just above the 200 euros per month. If you keep it running for 730 hours a month, then this will be your price if you have it running in West Europe. Keep in mind, as all services in Azure, you also pay for the outbound data transfer. These are the SKUs that Microsoft announced from within your Azure Bastion service. It also added a use case which we find very hard to come up with, where we use more than 500 terabytes per month. Then you need to contact sales, but it's quite hard to think about any use case where you had to transfer more than 500 terabytes using Bastion. Also keep in mind, in the standard queue, you have the option to scale, but you also pay for those additional scale units. It's not the full price that you pay, but you pay for each scale unit that you add to your standard Azure Bastion. So also keep that in mind. Just don't open up everything. Each additional scale unit has its own price. And of course, it depends on the regions. West Europe is in Zone 1, together with most of the known regions, but there's also Zone 2, which is Australia East, for example, things like that. So also keep in mind that it could be a different price depending on the zone. Enough talk, let's show you how the Azure Bastion service works. Let me show you. So what I did is I created a hub-spoke model, a typical hub-spoke model, where we have our hub VNet, one VNet located in France Central and one located in West Europe. And in West Europe, we have our Linux virtual machine, and in France Central, we have our Windows virtual machine. And if you look at our Windows VM, so it's running in France Central, there's still the option to connect, as Wim already showed. If we would click on RDP, right now, we only have a private IP. So there's no public IP assigned to our VM. It's only assigned to our Bastion instance. So if we would try to connect using this RDP file, it wouldn't work because we don't have a site-to-site or express route available, no point-to-site, so it would definitely fail. Therefore, we want to use Bastion, so you either click here on Bastion. If you are mistaken, you can still jump to Bastion here, and it will point you to Bastion over here, or simply click over here on Bastion, of course. If you want to connect, it asks for credentials. So I will type in my username password for a Windows VM. A great tip from Wim as well, if you want to change your settings using Bastion, you can still change it over here. So you can still change protocol if you want, and also change your keyboard layout. So if I want to have a different keyboard layout, you can still switch over here to, for example, Belgian French for the special case using a Windows device. Let me click on connect.
It also only works with Windows VMs. It doesn't work with Linux ones.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah.
Or still doesn't work with the Linux ones.
So it opens up a new tab, and you are connected to your Windows virtual machine, and you can, of course, do all management, do all the changes that you want. If you want to open a PowerShell, you can simply manage your full VM as you would RDP into your virtual machine. And there, for me at least, there's not that much difference in performance if you would RDP to your virtual machine or you use the Azure Bastion service. So it's definitely a quick and fast responding service for your environment. This is our Windows VM. So the typical Windows VM. Also available is the Linux VM. The same idea. You can connect. Connection, only the port is available protocol. As Wim said, no keyboard over here. Type in username. And then a feature for Linux, if you don't use a password, but use a private key, you can either copy paste the private key right here into the input box, or you can upload a file, or you can even use a key vault. So if you store your private key in your key vault, you can point it to your key vault and to the secret that you want to use, and use that secret to connect to your Linux virtual machine. I just used a username and password.
And that would be the best way to use it in an enterprise environment.
Yeah, definitely. And as you can see, we're connected to my Ubuntu VM. So it is available to change things. As I always say, I'm not a Linux guy. I know some commands, but it's super basic. So that's why I always use this demo in Linux. If you don't know it, just type in curl and then para.live, and then you get an awesome para GUI. It's then just to show you that that definitely works. Now, before I give it back to Wim, let me jump. Yeah, I have to admit, so I did prepare a brand new Bastion this morning, so the brand new environment for this demo. But for some reason, and it's very unlikely that it happens, there are some issues on Azure.
I think in the West Europe location, there weren't not enough resources available. And in the back, Azure Bastion still uses some VMs to build up, so probably it's related to that one. But I think it's fixed now, I thought, because I ran my script.
I did some retests this just before the session, but the Bastion host just doesn't end up working. So I did it. I used the Bastion from last week, but yeah, just to show you that it definitely works. If you hit on the Bastion, you can see which sessions are connected to that Bastion host, also which user, which is the target IP, target resource, and the protocol that is being used. And you can also, if we just give it some time, we can also do a delete from that session. And what happens is you can see that the client is now reporting that there's an unstable connection. And you will see that in a few seconds.
You just made an administrator really happy, I think.
Yeah, indeed. That the session is disconnected. So you can definitely remove sessions to your Bastion instance. Also good to know, if you have deployed a basic or a standard SKU, you can still go back or go up. Downgrading is not allowed. So as you can see, as soon as you are on a standard SKU, you can't go back to a basic SKU. But if you are running on a basic, you can go up to a standard SKU. So,
and you still need to do it always through the portal, because it's not this admin task is not yet available through Azure PowerShell, CLI, ORM, or whatever. You still need to go into the portal to your basic Bastion host and really click on it to change it. And it will also take up to 8-10 minutes before everything is updated again.
Yeah. So keep it in mind. If you want to change it, do it not during production, but there is the possibility to go from basic to standard. And I think that's about it for my end. So we can jump back to Wim.
Let me share my screen again. Okay. Should be showing, I hope. Yeah, there is. Let me share my deck again. So, by the way, I always enjoy seeing that parrot dancing, Micha. It's an easy thing to do, but yeah, it's always nice to see. So, after us looking into what Azure Bastion is, let us now take a deeper look on how to deploy and how you need to configure Bastion and what options do you have. First of all, like with every new deployment in Azure, it's best to check if Azure Bastion is available in your region. Currently, Bastion is available in almost all Azure regions, but there are still some regions where the server isn't available. So check it out before you want to use it. Next to that, also always specify a good name for the Bastion resource and for all its required resources, which of course needs to follow your Azure naming convention. So we hope you really have one in place and that you can follow it by the letter. Also specify which resource tags you want to use with it. By the way, a good tag to use in combination with Azure Bastion is, for example, one that describes the VNet. In this way, you can easily find in which VNet, probably is Hub VNet, that Bastion host is deployed. And then before you start deploying Bastion, you can already create the specific subnet in your VNet. Like you could see on the demo from Micha, the subnet always need to have the name Azure Bastion subnet, and these days it should be at least a /26 or larger. By the way, if you already deploy that subnet in advance and you want to better protect it through the use of an NSG, then you need to make sure that all the necessary inbound and outbound security rules are in place to allow the necessary access for the Azure Bastion host. Otherwise, your deployment will fail. Also, keep in mind that you can't combine Azure Bastion with Azure Firewall. So you shouldn't associate any route table from your Bastion subnet to go through the Azure Firewall. Otherwise, Azure Bastion would not work. Next to that, you can also these days still not use Azure Bastion in combination with Azure Private DNS zones if you're using them in some way. So that's also not yet supported. Next to that, the Bastion host itself requires a static pip. If you also want to create, you're using infrastructure as code, and you also want to create that one in advance, be sure to use the standard public IP SKU. And whenever all those resources are available, you can start deploying your Bastion host. You can use the Azure Portal, you can use Azure PowerShell, Azure CLI, ARM templates, biceps, Terraform, whatever. It's all available. So you can choose whatever you're familiar with deploying from. So a thing we also want to mention is, and a thing we also mentioned with the previous slide, is that to harden your Azure Bastion subnet, you can use an NSG. And in this way, you can only allow the necessary inbound and outbound traffic. So like you can see, Azure Bastion requires a lot of inbound rules, most of them to allow ingress traffic to the Azure Bastion host, and this to allow traffic to the control and data plane, but also one to allow ingress traffic from Azure Load Balancer, for example. Next to those inbound rules, Azure Bastion also requires some outbound specific rules. Two of them to allow the egress traffic to the VMs via RDP for Windows and SSH for Linux VMs. And all the other ones to allow egress traffic from the Azure Bastion host to the data plane. Otherwise, Azure Bastion could not communicate with all the required services in the back, and it will not work. Which you can also see is whenever we apply an NSG, we specify the required inbound rules, and then mostly the last rule we use is a 900 rule, where we deny any other traffic. In this way, the default NSG rules won't be used, and you only specify which things you want to allow. If you also want to place a VM on the subnet, if you also want to place an NSG on the subnet where your VMs live in, you can also do so, and then, for example, allow port 22 or 3389, and then specifically specify it from to the Azure Bastion subnet IP range that only that one may use those specific ports. The thing is, like I also already mentioned, if you change the NSG and you delete a specific rule, or you create the NSG in advance and you want to attach it to the Azure Bastion subnet, and you're missing one inbound or outbound rule, you can see your deployment will fail. One way it will fail to save your subnet, or it will even fail to delete the security rule, for example. So also keep those in mind. As an Azure administrator these days, we also from time to time need to troubleshoot your Azure services. And just like with all other servers, you can also use log diagnostics for Azure Bastion. So for example, when a user logs into a workload using Azure Bastion, Bastion can log diagnostics of those remote sessions. You can then use those sessions to view which user has connected to which workloads, when he has connected, and from where. In order to use diagnostics, you just need to enable the diagnostic settings. So you go to Azure Bastion through the portal, for example, if you do it in that way. You go to diagnostic settings. Yeah, you can see I already have diagnostic settings in place. You can simply click Add Diagnostic Settings. In this way, because I already have one in place, I click on Edit Settings. And then you specify Bastion audit logs under categories. You can also specify all metrics. And I mostly send all information to my log analytics workspace, which is located in another subscription under my management subscriptions, which is placed under my platform management groups. But you can also send it to a storage account, event hub, whatever you want, in whatever way you do it within your company. You can also use JIT in combination with Azure Bastion. Good to know is that the request access button still is not available under the Bastion blade. So you first need to go to the RP blade, click on request access. If it's a Windows VM, of course, is it an SSH, you do it under SSH tab. And then when the request is granted, you can see access approved. You can jump over to the Bastion blade and connect to your Bastion host like Micha showed you in the demo. Of course, there are also some RBAC rules you can use in combination with Azure Bastion. Best is to see, of course, like with all your other RBAC rules, to use the least access privilege model. So the least you should have to be capable to use Bastion is to have the reader role on the VM, also the reader role on the NIC of the VM, and then also read the reader role on the Azure Bastion resource itself. A thing we also want to mention is that next to connecting to your Windows VM and Linux VMs, you can also connect to all VMs in a VM scale set, or even the VMs in dev test labs. And that you can, I think you can have up around 25 concurrent RDP connections and around 50 SSH connections. But those numbers can change if there are already ongoing RDP or SSH sessions. So normally a couple of admins could connect in the same time to the same VM. Should be capable. A new feature, which is currently in preview, is Kerberos authentication. So by default, Azure Bastion connects through NTLM, but to better secure it, you can also use Kerberos. The only thing you need to do is you need to update, you need to have your own Azure IaaS domain controller in your environment. It should have the DNS server role installed on it. And then you specify the IP address of your Azure IaaS domain controllers on the VNets as a DNS servers. And then simply under Azure Bastion enable Kerberos, which is currently in preview, so don't use it for any production VMs. And once you enabled it, you can start using connecting with your domain accounts without use of Azure AD or whatever. Just simple with your domain account, you can log into your Azure IaaS VMs. Of course, you can also automate the deployment. A way to do it and to install Azure Bastion is through through the portal, but there are better ways to do it. I also written an Azure PowerShell deployment script, which does quite a lot. It will select the correct subscription. It will set all your tags. It will create a resource group for your Bastion host. It will also check if the resource groups are already available. It will skip it. It will create the necessary NSG with all the in and outbound rules which are required. It will specify diagnostic settings on that NSG. It will specify tags on that NSG. It will also create the required PIP with all the settings, tags, diagnostic settings, and so on. Then it will deploy the Bastion host itself. Whenever I deploy a Bastion in a customer environment, I always use the basic SKU as default. That's the cheapest one of the two SKUs, but and it's easy to automate it in the back to maybe kill it and start it up again. And if a customer requires a standard SKU, he can still enable the standard SKU by going through the portal like Micha showed you and do it. It will also set the diagnostic settings on that specific SKU, and it will even put a resource lock on the Bastion resource group. There are also some other community scripts and solutions that we want to mention, and most of them are focused on cost. So there's an Azure Logic app written by Parveen Singh, which will give you the possibility to start up and deploy a Bastion host whenever you need it through an Azure Logic app. So all required resources like the PIP will stay there, but you can start up and delete the Bastion host whenever you need it, and whenever you don't need it, you drop it again. So in that way, you can save money, and you don't need to have to pay Bastion for the price like Micha, like 131 euros each month. Maybe you can limit the time for only during related run through business hours or whatever. Then Ben Humberston also wrote an Azure function. So in that way, you don't need to go to the Logic app, start it, and drop it. You can just set the function and let it start during business hours. So maybe at 8 o'clock in the morning, the Bastion host will be deployed. And maybe at 7 p.m. in the evening, it will be dropped, and so on. And by using those, you can really reduce the cost of Azure Bastion. But maybe let me also demo it shortly. So if you use that specific script and you go to the Azure Bastion host, for example, I already upgraded to the standard SKU. So what it will do, you can see there is a lock on the specific Azure Bastion resource group. You can see all tags are placed. You can see I have the VNet tag is already in place. My diagnostic settings are already in place. And all by running one simple script. For example, if you want to enable that Kerberos, we still have some few minutes, I think, Micha, if I'm correct.
Yes, I think
So
3 minutes.
Okay, we'll go fast. So you also have, when you enable the Kerberos authentication, it's still in preview, and you want to check if Kerberos is being used instead of NTLM. There is an easy way to do it. I will do it to GP Edit. So you can see I've connected to my management server through Bastion, and if I want to disable NTLM, for example, I just type in GP Edit in MSC. I don't make any typos. Okay, let me enlarge this one. You just go to Windows settings. You click on security settings. Let me enlarge this one also. You go to local policies, security options, and then if I'm correct, it should be somewhere over here. NTLM. I'll look over it. Network access. Let me enlarge this one. Local system. No, that's not the one. Now I'm missing it. I'm overlooking it, Micha.
It's not that clear here for me. So it's
okay. Here I have it. Restrict NTLM on this domain. You specify the name for domain and you set it, and then in that way, incoming it is this one, by the way. You need to specify network security, restrict NTLM, audit incoming NTLM, and then you specify enable out. No, it's not that one. It's restrict. Restrict NTLM. It's this one. Network security, restrict NTLM, incoming NTLM traffic, and then you specify deny for all domain accounts, and in that way, NTLM will not be used whenever you connect to a domain account through your VM. And then in that way, if you're still able to log on, you will see that Kerberos is used in the back by Bastion. So maybe I need to make a screenshot of this one and place it in the chat, maybe, because even I was looking at it. So with that being said, is there something else we can mention? Maybe if you ever want to troubleshoot or monitor, you can also go to metrics. And if your Azure Bastion host is malfunctioning or doing strange, you can simply use the metric Bastion communication status. And if it's showing the number 1, your Azure Bastion host should be available in the back. If it's showing 0, there is a problem with the Bastion host, and maybe you need to open a ticket to, you can also do it from the bottom to support to figure it out, or maybe look into Azure Service Health or the Azure update page to see if something in the back is happening that doesn't allow your Azure Bastion host to function normally. So maybe to close off, I can show some key takeaways, maybe Micha, and then. So there are 5 things we think you should really remember about our session of today. First of all, Azure Bastion is a PaaS server that you provision inside in your virtual hub virtual network, and which gives you secure and seamless RDP SSH connectivity to your IaaS VMs, and this directly in the Azure Portal over SSL. When you use Azure Bastion, in our opinion, there's really no need anymore to use any public IPs in your environment. Keep in mind that these days, with the VNet peering, you only need 1 Bastion host deployed in your hub to be able to connect to any VM in your spoke VNets. Of course, you can also harden your Bastion host through the NSG. You can do it with Kerberos, which is in preview at the moment, and even with JIT. And last but not least, Azure Bastion itself, it costs some money. So keep an eye on your cloud spend and try to optimize the use of Azure Bastion through that Azure Logic app, or even by use of the Azure function. You can also use my deployment script to easily deploy it, then use another script to delete it, and maybe give people the possibility to just deploy it through Azure PowerShell or ARM whenever they need it. So we also have some references. Probably we'll make the slides available, and Mike and Henry can share them to whoever who's interested. And with that being said, I think, Micha, we can answer some questions. But before we do that, we want to thank you for your attention. And if you ever want to contact us, you can do so through our Twitter handles. The QR codes are also on the slide. So we're always happy to help and answer any of your questions.
Yes.
It's right on time, if I'm correct.
Yeah, thank you, guys. Yeah, it was a great session. We already also had some questions, so let me get them here. So we had a question from Cloud
Sandbox. Yeah, it's a question. So it works at layer 3. So what it does, you probably have an NSG attached to the subnet where your VM is located. And when you enable JIT, it will create an NSG rule on that specific subnet with JIT security rule, and it will enable the specific management port or whatever port you're required to connect. If it's 3389, if it's 22, it will open it, and that for the specific amount of time you specify in the rule specifically for that VM. So if you specify 3 hours, that NSG will be there 3 hours, allowing access on port 3389. You can even specify the IP address from where you're connecting. Maybe you have a dedicated IP address at home from a specific device or whatever, and you only want to allow it for that one. You can even specify that. And after 3 hours, the NSG rule is automatically deleted, and you need to request access again. There are, even with PIM, there are better ways and higher ways, but JIT is, it's been there a long time, but it's not. You can also use it with your private IP address, so it's not a requirement that it's used in combination with the PIP. You can also use, like you could see, we have Azure Bastion. We have Micha had shown in a demo that he has a VM only with a private IP address. He can also enable JIT. So if an administrator needs to connect, he first needs to request access, then go to the Bastion tab, and then he can go further. But in the back, it just creates an NSG for the specific amount of time, allowing that specific port from that specific location if you specified it, and that's the only thing it does. So in NSGs, if I'm still correct, it's at layer 3, I think.
Okay, I think that will answer the question. And we have another question from B. Barut. Thank you for the great session. Is it still necessary for every user that will use Bastion to have access to the Azure Portal, Azure account, or can it be provided without? I think some of it
already kind of answered it, I think, because you need some specific roles to either view the VM and view the Bastion instance, things like that.
But I think he means he wants to connect from his own device on-prem. You can use your own RDP client. It's available with a native client. If you enable that marker on your Bastion, it's available and it's already GA in the meantime. So it would work. So you can connect from a Linux VM on-prem without opening your Azure portal through that Azure Bastion tunnel command, or you can use it in combination with your Windows or the P client, for example. Yeah. If you want to try that one out, it's well written on the docs. It's a doc that's correct at the moment. You can follow it from top to bottom without jumping to other links or whatever. So that one is really clear.
Okay, so, thanks, guys.
You can use it through the Azure portal, but you can also use your native client.
I've got one final question, if I may. And that's from a governance point of view. What you see in a lot of customers is that they also have to provide suppliers of specific software access to a specific workload VM to install or upgrade or whatever the software. So I've deployed Bastion at one client, and they were really interested in things like, is it possible to record a session to see what a supplier has done, and keep track of that? Or is there a way to offload the event feed?
Maybe, but yeah, it's not that clear always. Sometimes it's well available, so all information who connected, how they have connected, but yeah, you need to enable the diagnostic settings and all those things. If you don't enable those things, it's quite difficult. Yeah, it's not like you can click on a button and record current session and then we can download it or something. But you can use the activity log and enable the diagnostic settings. And that's what I always do whenever I deploy Bastion. It's for me, tagging, the logs, all those things, it should be in place whenever
you see specific things like who is connected to when to which VM, but you can't see what he has been doing. Yeah. It's a feature requests, I think, for recording sessions in Azure Bastion, so you can indeed record what he's been doing, but it's not there yet. So
they need to go through two protocols in a way, so it's not that easy, I think. But it's like Micha said, it's a feature request, and hopefully it will be there. You're muted, Henry.
Yeah, I'm struggling with sound here. I'm sorry about that. Thanks for answering, Wim, Micha. Thanks for the session.
Yeah. Thanks, Micha. Thanks, Wim, for your session. It was a really delight watching your session, and I hope to see you next time as well.
Yeah, let's hope we meet in person.
Yeah, let's hope that as well.
Yeah, probably now everything is open up again, so we're not that far away from each other. So
That's true. So for the next session, we have Gonzalo Bizzo about Azure SQL data management instances. So we will hope to see you there. It's in the beginning of June, around the same time during lunch. So you can grab your lunch and join us for that session. And that leaves me with the question for everyone that would like to speak at our Cloud Takeaways. This is a QR code to our CFP page. Just supply your talk, and we will look at it, and maybe we will see you next time during our Cloud Takeaway. And without further ado, I thank everyone for watching, and I hope to see you next time as well for our next session. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.